So this is the masthead of William Lloyd Garrison's original abolitionist newspaper, but it's colorized because it's the Liberator dot today. We are considering two dreams that Chief Plenty Coups of the Crow Nation had when he was but a boy, ages 9 and 10. In these dreams, philosopher Jonathan Lear finds for us today a blueprint for radical hope. My name is Lowell Bliss. Welcome to episode 38 of the Liberator Today's video series on hope. The old Chief Plenty Coups narrates his story to Frank Linderman, a man he calls Sign Talker. He's perhaps 80 years old when he meets with his biographer. The days of his youth he describes with much fondness and remembered energy. Like all the young boys, he was called a magpie, a pesky rascallion who was being trained up in physical courage until that day when he could count coup and become a man. Linderman explains this custom. Quote, "To count coup, a warrior had to strike an armed and fighting enemy with his coup stick, quirt, or bow before otherwise harming him, or take his weapons while he was yet alive, or strike the first enemy falling in battle, no matter who killed him, or strike the enemy's breastworks under fire, or steal a horse tied to a lodge in an enemy's camp, etc. The first named was the most honorable, and to strike such a coup, a warrior would often display great bravery. An eagle's feather worn in the hair was a mark of distinction and told the world that the wearer had counted coup." Unquote. If a young warrior managed to count coup, he could immediately pick a wife. Otherwise, he had to wait until he was 25 years old. Wives of coup-counting men would walk in front of their husbands, both of them in the front part of the processions. Jonathan Lear explains, quote, "Obviously, the practice of counting coup valorized bravery, a trait that was necessary for the Crow to survive. Honor was accorded to brave men, along with access to women, extra food, and other material benefits. Imaginative, desiring, erotic, honor-seeking life was organized around this kind of bravery. Little boys would play at counting coups, and little girls would dance with the scalps that their brave boyfriends had brought them." Unquote. As a magpie, Plenty Coups had of course not yet counted coup. He did, however, show great promise. His name, which I won't try to pronounce in the Crow tongue, might more literally be translated many achievements. Even that's not his original name. His grandfather gave him that name, quote, after having a dream vision in which his grandson would have a long life and count many coups. Plenty Coups told Linderman the story of how, at the end of a buffalo hunt, a group of adult horsemen had created a circle around a wounded and tormented bull. The magpies were called out. Plenty Coups' grandfather called out to them, "A cool head with quick feet may strike this bull on the root of his tail with a bow. Be lively and take care of yourselves. The young man who strikes and is himself not hurt may count coup." Plenty Coups was the first off his horse, the first to strip naked. He struck the bison not once but twice, the second time while standing firm to the last second until the bull had completed its charge. This was not the official counting coup, however. When Plenty Coups had his first dream at age 9 after his brother's death, he had still not counted coup. Last week we started describing, interpreting, and applying Plenty Coups' first dream. Let's continue. Remember, Plenty Coups had been led by a spirit person, the chief of the little people, into a lodge where on the south side of the lodge sat all the strong and destructive forces of the world. They did not want this boy here. But Plenty Coups found the wisdom to accept that these forces had, quote, rights in the world, had work to do, and were also in the world under the sovereignty of their creator God, Abba.Dia. Plenty Coups is seated with the spirit persons on the north side of the lodge. He narrates, quote, "Take these, Plenty Coups." The person at the head of the lodge at the north side handed me several beautiful first feathers of a war eagle. "Stick one of your feathers in the ground before you and count coup," said the dwarf chief. I hesitated, Plenty Coups said. I had never yet counted Coup, and here in the lodge with old warriors was no place to lie. Count Coup, commanded the dwarf chief. I stuck a first feather into the ground before me, fearing a dispute. That, said the dwarf chief, is the rider of the white horse. I first struck him with my coup stick, and then, while he was unharmed and fighting, I took his bow from him. The thunderers, who sat at the head of the lodge on the south side, said, Nothing can be better than that. Stick another feather before you, Plenty Coups, said the dwarf chief. I stuck another first feather in the ground, wondering what the dwarf chief would say for it. But this time I was not afraid. That, he said, is the rider of the black horse. I first struck him with my bow, then while he was armed with a knife and fighting me, I took his bow from him, also his shield. Enough, said the persons on the south side. No person can do better than that. Let us leave off counting coups. We are glad you have admitted this young man to our lodge, said the bad storms. Let's stop there and interpret this episode for our own sakes as we build a blueprint for radical hope. It was the custom of the Crow for the warriors to gather together in a lodge after a battle, and for those who have counted coup to stick a feather in the ground and recount the tale of their bravery. Plenty Coups was fully familiar with this scene. He was also fully aware that, according to the data of his life, he really didn't belong inside this circle, and that it would be a lie if he had made a claim to counting coup. He nonetheless obeys the forceful command of the dwarf chief and sticks a feather in the ground. But then it isn't Plenty Coups who tells the story. He has no tale to tell. Instead, it is the dwarf chief who tells the story, and he uses the first-person pronoun. I first struck the white rider. I first struck the rider of the black horse with my bow. Plenty Coups gets the credit, but it is the dwarf chief who has done the work. Plenty Coups is welcomed into the circle of worthy warriors, but as the result of the imputed merit of another. Is it inartistic for me to draw out the parallel? We are capable people. Some of you are so smart, so talented, you have such a strength. Some of you are naturally resilient. But when Jesus contemplated his own work, his crucifixion, his resurrection, when he declared it is finished, he meant that your basis for your hope was finished in him. Now count coup. Take the feather that you did not earn and without fear stick it in the ground before the dark and accusing forces of your life, of this world. You belong here. Jesus has defeated sin and death. When my son, our firstborn, left for university for the first time, we took one last family vacation of his childhood. We were on the rocky northern Atlantic coast in Massachusetts. One evening, his mom and I called him off by ourselves to the beach. It was something we wanted to tell him. Perhaps I was primed as a father. I had lost my dad just over a year earlier. I had recently traveled to Kenya for the first time, where two young men, one from the Coup tribe and one from the Liu, had asked me, is it true that there is no ceremony in your culture for marking when a boy becomes a man? That they just turn 18 and that's it? They had asked me. Robin and I spoke to Connor and told him what we saw and admired in him. I spoke the words, you are a man. I spoke the words, you have what it takes. And he does. He's proven it time again in the last 3 years since. He's had many achievements. We wanted Connor to find hope in how God had created him and into what had already been built into him. In the end, though, we had to tell him that he could only trust his upbringing up to a point, that Robin and I had tried our best, but with many failures. What we were trying to do was commend him to the finished work and infinite grace of God. Psalm 33 reads, No king is saved by the size of his army. No warrior escapes by his great strength. The horse is a vain hope for deliverance. Despite all its great strength, it cannot save. But the eyes of the Lord are on those who fear him, on those whose hope is in his unfailing love, to deliver them from death and keep them alive in famine. We wait in hope for the Lord. He is our help and our shield. In him our hearts rejoice, for we trust in his holy name. May your unfailing love be with us, Lord, even as we put our hope in you. Next week we conclude Plenty Coups' first dream as he helps us build a blueprint for hope. I'm Lowell Bliss, Christian environmental missionary and climate activist. Thank you for visiting the Liberator today.